Hey Shanti, how are you?
Um, I don't think I can hear you. Hold on.
You can't hear me.
Wait, is it? I'm gonna take my headphones out real quick and see if that helps.
Can you hear me now? No. Uh, you might have to give permission to your browser. I can't hear you. I could hear you before. You might have to give your browser permission to use your own. Still can't hear me? No, I can't hear you. It's probably a setting on your. Can you hear me now? No. Oh, you can hear me? I can't hear you. I could hear you before, though, with your mic when you had your headset on. Try now? No, not yet. Don't worry. People have technical difficulties. I'm going to rejoin. Okay.
Does it work now?
Oh my God, I can hear you. Can you
There
hear
we go.
me?
Yeah. I think what happened was I had taken off my headphones because I couldn't hear, but my computer volume was just down, so it kind of messed it up. But
Well, cool. Well, thanks for joining today. I've never. How old are you? 14?
yeah.
You're 14 and you've done how many books? Seven or 10?
17.
17. So I got a 7 and 10, 7 plus 10, 17. I knew it was something like that. That's crazy. I was reading the beginning of some of your books to try to get an idea of what you write about. And you're 14. How do you come up with these ideas? Like, these are very sophisticated stories that you're writing about. You come up with these. What's the one character's name? Finch or,
Yeah.
I mean, where do you get these names at 14?
The names are very random. Sometimes I'll just like hear like a name or like just any word. I'll be like, that could make a really good name. And I write it down. So I have this whole document just full of like character names. That's where I got that one from. And then as for ideas, they usually come to me. They're a lot less sophisticated when I first think of it. I kind of have to like develop the idea first.
What is, I'm laughing. At 14, I was not developing ideas. My idea was that I wanted to go play soccer and lacrosse and get done with my homework as fast as possible. But did you take a course on this, Shanti? Are your parents writers? How does this happen?
I don't. It's kind of strange because I don't really know. I've just always been very fascinated by writing. So, believe it or not, I've never taken a formal writing class. Like I've never taken any like courses or anything like that. And yeah, my parents, they don't write.
So you are in what grade? Or it's summer now, right?
Almost. I get out on June 23rd, but I'm in eighth grade.
You're in eighth grade, so you've taken eighth grade English.
Yeah,
Who do you have an editor for your books?
I do. Yeah.
How did you find an editor?
So my editor's also like my writing coach. So she kind of like mentors me. So that's in a way like writing classes. So she'll read my books and she'll give me like feedback a lot because there's a lot of plot holes sometimes. So she reads them, makes sure they make sense, and like finds the plot holes. As for like when I found her, that was in 2020, so it's very much like a blur. online somehow. I don't remember. My parents helped me with that part.
And because how many books had you written as of 2020 before you had a writing coach?
I was writing my first novel, so I had like two novellas before that that are really bad. And then I was like writing my first novel that was actually like a good and like an actual strong kind of plot, and I just kind of felt lost. So I found someone, and yeah.
And you meet every week, or does she go over your writing and then you talk about it? Is that how it works?
We meet twice a week.
Wow. How long's a novel? How long's a novel? I mean, isn't a novel like 75,000 words?
Around that, yeah, usually 60, 75,000 words. The majority of my books are over about 60,000, I think it was. I think my average right now is around 65,000. I'm probably doing the math wrong. Cuz like I have some that are around 80,000 words, 90,000 words, and I have some that are around 55,000, so somewhere in that kind of area.
Now, do you just sit down and start? Are you writing one book at a time? Are you writing multiple books at a time? How's it work for
I
you?
only write one book at a time. However, I'm trying to like develop ideas as I'm writing one. But I'm never writing two books at once because then it gets kind of stressful.
So do you have one notebook? I used to have notebooks that I would file. Now I use GoodNotes on an iPad, and I still write the notes, but it records them digitally. How do you do it?
Usually I write things like any ideas I have or like ideas for the book I'm writing and just notes and stuff like that. I write in my notes app on my phone. If I handwrote it, it would like anything, it would get so messy so quickly. But actually, I write my actual books on usually Readsy. However, I did do Google Docs once just to try it. It was laggy.
Yes. So what do you use? Readsy?
Readsy, it's a kind of platform for authors, but it has a typesetter that I write in because it has a lot of really good kind of, I don't know the word for it, just support. So there's like a word count tracker where it tracks how many words you've written each day. You can set goals and stuff, and it's really helpful.
Well, when I read about you, I said I have to talk to this young woman because most people aspire to write a book at some point in their entire lifetime. And you've written 17 at 14, and these are real books that 70,000 words is a lot to write. How long do you think how long does it take you to write a book?
On average, 2.5 months for my first draft.
And do you have a process where you say, I get up at 8 o'clock and I'm going to write for 3 hours, or does it come to you? How do you figure out the cadence?
So first, like my biggest tip is like I write like 1,000 words every single day. Before like right in the middle of the pandemic when I was still in online school or like on weekends, I'd wake up around 10, I'd start writing at 11, and I'd write around 500 words, then take a break and write 500 more. Now it's kind of like I'll get home from school and I'll sit down and I'll write, a certain amount, like maybe like 500 words again, and I take a longer break or I'd sit there thinking. It's very now more random. Like sometimes I'll write 1,000 words in one sitting, other times I'll take like an hour or something to do it.
Well, let's talk about the program. I started writing a book on a topic that I actually know really well, which is how to write a business plan in 13 slides. And I started writing it like you, I think in your first book. I didn't write it in Google. I just started in Pages, which is an Apple. Do you have an Apple computer?
Yeah.
I figured you did. So I started writing in Pages, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Kelly, who said, you should use Scrivener. Have you heard of Scrivener?
I have. I've thought about using it. It's just like I've gotten so used to Readsy that I worry that like kind of switching to a different one would be a little hard. However, like it has a lot of good kind of organizing options and outlining options, and I'm really interested in trying to use that in the future.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's better than Readsy or not. All I know is that I didn't even want to switch from Pages because I said, I'll just write it. And Kelly and I were talking one Saturday afternoon, and she said, you've got to get Scrivener because writing a book is very different than just writing a paper with all of your chapters and everything. And I'm like you in many ways, Shani. I didn't want to spend the time to invest to actually learn the new program because that in itself takes hours, right?
Yeah.
but I did it, and I will tell you, I will look at Reedsy, but I have to say that I probably would never write another book again without it because isn't it, didn't you find it like so hard to scroll back and say, okay, well, what happened here? And then in a single document, it's just really hard.
Yeah, the single document. So Reedsy splits it into chapters, which is super helpful. It's so stressful doing one document. So when I was writing on Google Docs, I would write I would write at school a lot when I was writing my book Never Dying, which is like my best book, and I did do it on Google Docs, but I was at school for a lot of the time when I wrote it, and I would write it like during my elective, and to load it up on a very laggy Chromebook, and then to watch as it like completely scrolls. It would take 5 minutes to scroll to the bottom, and then if I wanted to scroll back up, it would be a completely different kind of problem, and it was just too laggy. So like the chapters, because it only has to load one chapter at a time, is super helpful.
I like that laggy Chromebook.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, the school computers, like,
It's
we don't have good Wi-Fi at school, so that's part of it. But even at home, like, it would take me a good 5 minutes to load up the document and then just scroll to the bottom.
yeah, it's terrible. The now wh- when you develop these ideas, are you when you're in school, let's say, and you're going to come home and write 500 or 1,000 or whatever, however many words comes to you, are you thinking about this all the time in your head and saying, okay, here's what I want to do when I sit down and write? I mean, you're developing it all the time. Are you writing in your head before you write on paper, or do you sit down and it just comes to you?
Sometimes, but not always, there will be times when I like have this really clear idea of what I want to write and I'll be super excited to write. But then there'll be other times when I'll sit down and I won't know what I'm going to write and I'll have to kind of just think of something or I'll have to develop an idea. Actually, come to think of it, yesterday I had written a bunch, but then what happened was I was like, there needs to be a scene here, and I wasn't done. I hadn't done 1,000 words yet. So what I did is actually went back and I added that scene. And I didn't plan for that. I planned it to happen actually in a later chapter, but I was like, this needs to happen before. So sometimes like that, I'll do something completely unexpected. Other times, I'll just write a straightforward scene and I'll be done and I'll like know exactly what's going to happen. But there are a lot of times that I've been very, very lost.
In the and you just keep writing when that happens and just try to figure it's going to come to you.
If I have like writer's block like that and I just don't know what to do, I'll try to figure out like what would my characters do. That often does not actually work. So when I cannot think of anything at all, I'll throw in something insane that like makes sense, but also will like kind of surprise the reader, and then I'll have to write out that. So it's like if you can't think of anything, just add something that's kind of crazy, and it'll like in the second draft, you can make it work.
Well, I have to ask you, when you first started, it's really important in writing to get the plot right because if you don't have all of these things, I don't want to say done correctly, but done in a way that the human mind can organize. It's why movies work, right? Movies follow a very, I hate to say standard, but there's very standard things other than some outlier movie makers who do things like Pulp Fiction and things like that, who the audience tolerates because it's artistic. But if there's not a plot and you can't follow it, it's really hard for humans. They'll just say I don't like it or it's too hard. They might not even be able to tell you why. How did you figure that out in the beginning? Because that's really hard for anybody. I mean, it just come to you, or you watching stories and it just you said, okay, well, this is how a story happens. I'm just trying to understand get in that head of yours and understand how you do that.
So usually I'll come up with a plot and it'll be very basic, but like I know we have to get from point A to point B somehow, but it also has to make sense. And that's the current book I'm writing. It's been a great kind of challenge just to make it make sense because there's so much going on that all has to tie together in the end. So for the main plot, we need to figure out how the character gets from this to how then this new kind of thing starts. And it all has to tie together. And in that way, it's like I do have to try to follow a very kind of uniform path forward. However, there are some times when I feel like the book has like no plot whatsoever. That was apparent with Biomlock, where I started writing it with no idea of how it was going to end or what the characters' goals were. I just had an idea for a setting and like just this idea. And it ended up developing kind of on its own, where the characters started to meet each other and the kind of clear end to everything that was going on. I'm trying not to spoil the book. I do that a lot. Then the clear end again kind of came clear, and then I started writing towards that. But sometimes I feel like it takes a bit of just writing to kind of get to a point where we can see how it's going to end.
Do you have things that inspire you? One of your books felt very, and I'm just saying this, but there were many books and many movies long before you were even born, like The Hunger Games. There was Running Man, which Arnold Schwarzenegger, which was, I don't know if you've even seen that, but it is a very similar plot where humans are being chased and they can be killed and things like that. Do you see that and inspire you? Do you watch a lot of movies or read other books?
I read a lot. I don't quite watch as many movies anymore. I think sometimes what'll happen is I'll see an idea and I'll be like, this is really interesting. But what would happen if this were to have all of this? Usually that idea, like, it doesn't really surface until I've started writing the book. I like, especially actually when I'm pitching books just for, like, to publish, or when I'm writing my Amazon descriptions. I'll be like, what are two very different things that can be combined to kind of sound a little crazy? So the current book I'm writing, I kind of describe as a mix between Stranger Things and Harry Potter. So it's like in some ways I get inspired by different TV shows, but the idea of like combining them or changing something really big, or like what if this character is actually like this? Although I find my plots are very, very different than like the actual book that I was maybe inspired by. And this has only happened for like a few books. A lot of my ideas are just very random stuff.
Well, I had made some notes before we jumped on here because I was reading the other day and then yesterday the beginning of some of your books, and this God's right hand. I mean, this is pretty advanced. I'm not going to ruin it. I don't think I'm going to ruin it, but a person appears to be getting shot, but finds the bullet, I think, in her pocket. And I mean, that's a very sophisticated thing. How do you come up with that? Thinking that, I don't know. I'm trying to, it's very hard. Isn't it very hard when people ask you these questions because does it just really happen? You don't really have a process per se. I mean, you have a process, but you can't explain how the idea comes to you.
It depends. It's like there are some ideas I can really think of, like the clear, like how I got it. The God's right hand, I can 100% explain. That was actually, in some of my books, actually maybe over half of them, around half, a little less, somewhere around that, are what if questions. And I find that a lot, like exploring kind of questions. So the God's right hand was just like a what if idea I had. So like, what if you had this power that could turn the point of a war, but you yourself were not exactly kind of the fighting type, if that makes sense? Like, what would you do in that situation? Would you run? Would you enlist in the military? Would you get captured? Another book where that is kind of apparent was Never Dying, where I read this. I don't think it wasn't really a writing prompt. It was just this sad kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Just this sad description of like, what if this happened and what if this character died and stuff like that. And it was just this very basic idea, and I was like, what if I made it sadder? And what if I added this to it? Never Dying itself is not very sad because I decided to ditch the sad part. So now I have this very strange idea that I came up with. And I do think I'm going to make it sadder, like in the coming books. But the first book is honestly funny and just a fun, kind of exciting read.
Well, yeah, the book the characters I couldn't get over. Allie Infell, and who is this guy who I mentioned earlier?
Oh, from the Accidental Insurgent. So Finch,
yeah, accidental insurgent.
That would be Finch Breyer.
Finch Breyer. I mean, what a great name.
Thanks. The Accidental Insurgent, those names are funny. They were random. I just was like, oh my god, what if this was the last name and this was the first? I just came up with very random stuff. That book is the most chaotic book I've ever written because stuff just kept happening in every chapter. So it's like, they're about to die every chapter, or they're captured, or the house is burning down. All this very random stuff that like is possible, but it's kind of like the worst case scenario for everything. That book, I did not have a plot whatsoever. I didn't have any idea the day before I started writing it. I was just like, I kind of want to write something, and I just sat down and started writing it, and I did not stop. That book was the quickest book I've ever written because it took me 16 days to write, and the book is almost 70,000 words. Um, and I've never written a book quicker than that one. However, I have enjoyed writing some books more, and I've had some more books that I like more. But that one like holds a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, that's a real sprint.
Yeah.
How long after you write these books, how much editing has to happen? Because I know from me, just being in a book, or this is my first book, but a paper, even writing papers or writing blog posts, even, you see the things you want to see because in your mind you've already thought about them. So you think you're reading something that's on the paper when you're not, and you really need someone else to go in there. So how long does it, I mean, an editor, does that process take in general for you?
It depends. Usually it's a few months of editing. It depends on the length of the book and also like how much needs to change. There will be some times when the book is pretty clean because what I do sometimes I don't even realize it is I edit as I go along. So I will write out a scene, I will look it over, and I will start changing things. I will start clearing up the writing. So it usually my first drafts are pretty clean, and then I of course need to do another round where I'll read over it. Now usually my editing is more adding scenes and then clearing up some grammatical errors and just changing what I think should change. The current book I'm working on, there's gonna be a lot of editing, just because I worry it doesn't make sense. However, I have to read it through once I'm done and see. So far, I have one beta reader who I'm just one of my friends who I'm just sending the chapters to, and he's actually really enjoying it. But usually the editing takes longer than the writing for me. And then of course I have someone else look at it and read it. But to answer your question, it usually takes a few months. But depending on the book, like Biome Lock, I had to shorten a bunch of sentences, like clean things up, change a lot of the plot to make it actually make sense, and the dialogue was pretty bad. So the dialogue had to have some major changes to it as well.
Does it annoy you when an editor comes back and says, Shanti, I don't think this makes sense. I think you need to change this around?
Not really, because I feel like that's part of the process, and like I know like there are gonna be times when something's not gonna make sense, but I'll rewrite it, and I know it'll be like so much better. So like I'm usually grateful for feedback when it's helpful. I've had some like unhelpful feedback, not from editors, but actually from readers. Well, they'll message me and they'll be like, "You shouldn't have done this. This is not good writing." However, it's more of a plot thing that they didn't like me killing off a character. But I don't know if it I don't remember what it actually said. I had someone get really mad at me in a review and say that they didn't like that I killed off a character and ended the book on a cliffhanger. However, like the story arc was done. It was like this is like a series. That's how
Well,
it's gonna
I mean,
happen.
they may not, yeah, they may not like it, but you probably were going to write another one, which would
Yeah,
be a sequel, weren't you?
yeah. And I really after the three books, like everything's mostly solved. However, there's a tiny cliffhanger in the third book. However, it's like everything's resolved, but there is possibility for a sequel. That's how I like to end my series usually, and like my books, in case I ever want to return to the worlds.
Do you know what could happen in the next book when you leave it cliffhanging, or are you cliffhanging yourself?
Usually, I have some idea of what's gonna happen. Otherwise, I won't do it because then I'll like feel obligated to write another book. With the Gods Right Hand, actually, not really spoiler alert. I mean, it's a duology. Like, of course, it's gonna kind of end on a cliffhanger. I kind of know how it like where it needs to start and where it needs to end. However, all that in between stuff, all the plot, like kind of stuff, all the characters, like otherwise, I don't really know. So in that way, I kind of wish before I ended the book, I would have, had more ideas for a sequel. However, there are some books where like I have like the entire series planned out in my head. I haven't actually outlined it. But Never Dying was originally a standalone. I want to add two more books to the series because I love the characters so much. I know how the third book is going to end. I wrote the final scene in the third book. I haven't started the second one, so I have to kind of I don't know what I was gonna say there. It depends.
Well, I mean, that happens. You know where it could end up in the future, but everything in between you have to fill in. I actually find that writing can be easy once you understand the framework. And I think for me, I know if I was 14, I have dyslexia, so it took me a minute to figure out grammar, and I can't spell, but I think once I understood that there's going to be this in a paper, there would be an introduction, there would be a points you want to make with supporting documentation and a conclusion. Once you understand that, it's fill in the blank. And I think I have not written a story other than my own, but once you have a story arc as a backdrop, you sort of know what has to happen. Although I find it harder than the general story arc. Who did the his name's escaping me. Who's famous for doing that? Do you know? Not Malcolm Gladwell. I forget. It'll come to me. The writing a novel or writing a mystery or writing these sequential books is a little bit more than just writing a general story arc, isn't it? Because of the way you have to have all these plots and subplot in the subplot and this secondary character that you sort of have to tell a story about. Because if you don't do that, it doesn't become interesting.
Yeah, I find that the outlining is harder than the writing itself. A ton of people will disagree with me. A ton of people will agree with me that outlining for me, because if I don't have an idea of how long the scenes are going to be, it starts to get a little stressful because I'm like, well, what if this falls short? Or what if the book's not long enough? So very often what I'll do actually is I'll start writing the book and then I'll outline as I go. And usually by the time I'm about halfway, I'll have the entire book very detailed. I'll have a very detailed outline for the rest of the book. However, there have been some times when I've had no outline whatsoever, and I've just kind of winged it, and then I've had to go back and make sure everything makes sense. I think there's a quote that I cannot remember for the life of me who said, but it's something about how, just write the book, and then in a second draft pretend like you knew what was going to happen like all along. Something like that. And I really like that quote.
What type of grades do you get in English?
Usually my English grades are pretty good. Um, Usually, I don't know, I get pretty good grades usually. Mainly because I have a pretty kind of good understanding of English. Actually, not as much for my writing as opposed to reading because I read a lot, and in that way, I've kind of learned grammar. However, some of the schools I have went to have not been so great academically, so I found that I kind of had to teach myself a lot of things. I actually this year and last year I had really good English teachers, but in the year before, like I don't remember we learned like very much that we should have learned at the
That's terrible. That's sort of sad, isn't it?
I think honestly it's not that common. It's not that uncommon for a lot of schools to kind of, in my opinion, teach writing in a way that doesn't make students excited about it. Where they'll be like, you need to write this essay in this many sentences. And in that way we're actually teaching students to kind of not rush, but write shorter sentences that are just to get the kind of requirement instead of actually writing more detailed sentences and using better sentence structure.
Yeah, I think some of that's coming from writing on the internet because writing copy on the internet or writing a blog post or a story is very different writing online than it is on paper. Do you agree?
I agree. Oh, my writing on paper is so much worse than my writing on the computer mainly because I can go back and I can change things and I can always edit. Editing on paper, oh, I cannot do it. I cannot edit nearly as well as I do online than on paper.
Who's your favorite author?
100% Lee Bardugo, who wrote like Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. The way she writes, especially in like Six of Crows, is beautiful, and her stories are very just everything is so deep, and like even the characters' names have meanings. I don't know if this is true, but she will put certain chapters in characters' perspectives, so to hide something from the reader. So, and it's very just well thought out, and also her writing is like beautiful. And also her characters' backstories are really sad, and I like writing sad character backstories because I like torturing my readers.
Is that what it is?
Sometimes it's like I like kind of getting a reaction from the reader, and a great way to do that is with sadness, because it's true that a lot of people have very sad kind of backstories. And I think especially in fiction, it's like but also I do have some characters with very happy backstories and some characters that are just like average, but then the story itself makes them like not so average.
Yeah, I was reading something recently that about the words used in stories in the online media now, that if you use things that are sad and outrageous and things like that, that actually you get more engagement. And I think making people, I think when you talk about happy things, it makes people it makes them uncomfortable because of what you said, sadly, Santi. Like a lot of people have sad lives and sad stories and they want to be sad together. And if someone else is happy, then they feel insecure because someone else is happy and they're not.
I
So
kind
that's a
of
pretty deep insight that you've
yeah,
discovered at 14.
I think that's like very correct, and generally with writing too, it's like writing expresses emotion, and I feel like happy, unless the characters have gone through something to make them that way, or unless it's a very happy character, that's part of their personality. It's not nearly as strong of an emotion in sadness. And if you can have a character who goes through something horrible and is like sad, maybe it's on page, maybe it's a backstory, but then have them kind of transform into like happy again, and like just that's powerful. But just having everyone be really happy isn't interesting. Like it's not interesting to read a book where everything's really happy and everything's going great, because there's something obviously has to go wrong for it to kind of be interesting.
The irony for me talking with you is that you seem like a very happy, jovial young woman.
I am. That's true.
So it doesn't are you doesn't strike me that you're sad a lot. So how do you know how to write about sadness?
I've been sad before, and I've gone through a lot of really hard things. So in that way, it's like I can remember kind of how I felt. A lot of it also is kind of assumption and research, because there are things that have happened to my characters, or they'll be really really sad, or they'll have something like that makes them really not sad. I don't know what I was gonna say there. Or but something will happen to them that makes them really sad, but that I won't have experienced that. So I need to kind of research too. But a lot of it is like I write from experience. I don't know. I base a lot of characters off of myself, or off of like people I know, or off of just anything. And yeah.
Well, what would be I mean, what is sad to you at your age? What have you experienced that makes you sad most recently?
Hmm. I really hope they are not listening to this, but my friends have not been very nice to me right now, and
Why?
I don't know why. We're not on the same paths. They are more interested in, I don't want to say normal teenager things, but very concerning things for teenagers to be in. So, like alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. And it's sad to me to see these people that I was really good friends with kind of go down this very dark path at such a young age.
That's
And
very alarming to me that you
yeah.
said that. At 14, they're into alcohol and drugs. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I've met people at my age who are into worse, but yeah.
Well, that's sort of sad. But I will tell you from someone who's a tad bit older that that is generally common, and most of that, Santi, comes from insecurity. If any of those people are boys, it is highly likely that they actually like you, and they just don't know how to act. I actually tell my wife that way, Santi, still to this day after 27 years, and she'll say, "Well, why are you teasing me? Why are you doing that?" I said, "Boys do that to girls that they like. It's just the way it is." Now, I think girls. I'm obviously haven't been a girl, but I think they can just be mean. But a lot of that probably comes from insecurity. And you seem like a very mature young person who is on a career path. Is that how you feel?
Yeah. I think yeah, I just, these friends of mine, they both just kind of grown like me, and they weren't originally it's kind of, I don't know what's kind of caused it. It's kind of like a developmental thing in a way, but it's very concerning to me.
I think it is a developmental thing. I think you're in your teenage years, and I think people change and trying to figure out themselves. And you strike me as a person who you probably haven't figured out everything, but you probably figured out a lot.
Yeah.
And probably, do you think writing has helped you figure out some of this stuff?
Definitely because I've written about characters who are older than me, and I've written in the perspective of characters that are younger than me. In a way, I'm kind of discovering things by writing and discovering more about how people of different ages kind of act. Um, it's kind of actually scary now because I'm starting to grow older than some of my earliest like characters. So Biomock, which was my first novel, the characters were 13, and I started writing it when I was 12, and now I'm 14. And it's just it's a little weird to me because I thought
That year really makes a difference, doesn't it?
it does. It's very strange because now I see like they're like around seventh graders, and I see seventh graders is a lot younger now. But like, and I'm gonna be
Well,
15 in a few months, and that's the last age that that's the last Biomock book I wrote, which was Biomock 4. I need to write Biomock 5 and 6. Anyways, but the character was 15. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's grown up so much. I'm gonna be 15 in a few months.
yeah, that's a big move. You'll be driving.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be exciting. The Now, do you do illustrations for these books?
Not usually. I've thought about some books of mine that could really use like a couple illustrations. I have character art for most of my book characters. Usually, however, the only illustrations are on the cover. Actually, that's not true.
Who does your covers?
It's a variation of designers. I like to have the same designer per series. However, right now, my current like dystopian novels, so The Accidental Insurgent, The God's Right Hand, and Never Dying, are all designed by the same designer. But yeah, like the only real illustrations are on the character art, except actually in Biomock, and I will show this because I love it and I think it's very cool. I had maps in the book, and this is just my early copy of Biomock. So
Wow, that's cool. Now, how did you find these designers? Because that's hard too.
I found them from a variety of places. My Biomock designer was just from Reedsy because Reedsy actually has a marketplace where you can find designers. It's
I
actually
see.
very cool. Just yeah, the designers are a little pricey. So I've been kind of trying to find cheaper designers. Um,
What's pricey to you?
I mean, I've had I tried to submit some. I got quotes for well over $1,000. I mean, $2,000, $3,000 per cover, and I cannot
For one
afford.
cover.
Yeah, I cannot afford that. I do think the covers are beautiful, and I think the designers have a lot of kind of publicity, and that's why. However, I can't do that. Currently, I spend around like 300 on covers, I believe. That's what's pretty good to me,
Do
I
you
think.
believe in the cover? Like, do you think it's true that it's all in the cover to get people to buy it?
I think a lot of it is. Not all of it. A lot of it is like the marketing and the way the author's kind of talking about the book and the description, all of that kind of stuff. However, a beautiful cover. I will buy books solely because of the cover. I'm not shy to say that. However, usually I like reading the description, and if the description's very good, instant buy for me, 100%. But the cover, I think, is also just extremely important. I think that most authors should have a professionally designed cover, unless they're experienced with graphic design and know the market, because most cover designers know the market, and that is also extremely important.
Do you sketch the cover for the designer, or do you talk about it? Do you say, "Hey, I think it looks like this," or you just let them read the book, or how's that work?
Usually, what I do is I don't sketch it because I'm a really bad artist. I've tried. Oh, my cover sketches, especially the ones from when I was in like sixth grade writing Biomock, are very bad. So, usually what I do is I tell the designer, like, hey, what do you think about this? The current designer I have, actually, you tell them the plot of the book, and they'll send you a description of a concept, and then if you like it, you can kind of proceed with the order. I really like that. Usually their ideas are very in line with mine, so I was like explaining this whole idea. I wasn't really explaining. I was just writing it down, and I sent them, my plot, and they came up with the exact same idea. So we think alike.
Well, that's pretty cool. Now, do you, after the editor gives you the edits and you get to what you consider your final. Do you do the formatting on the final piece that has to do, it looks like, and you've mentioned it, you do Amazon publishing, is that right?
Yeah, KDP.
And you have to format it in a specific format for it to work. Do you do that?
I do. I use actually, well, sort of. So I don't use KDP's formatter because I just don't like the preferences. It's very generic. I actually use the software called Vellum to kind of format my books, and I, will select the headings and everything. Sometimes I'll upload my own chapter headings and stuff, and I'll choose the fonts. So it's kind of like a 50-50. Vellum is like my favorite writing platform I have.
What is this called?
Vellum, it's a formatter that you upload your book and you change the settings, and you can upload it in a print ready file or for ebook too. Let me see if I have an example of one of my headings for you.
So you buy that software.
Yeah. This is like the interior of Never Dying. Excuse the fact that I wrote in it. I highlighted it for TikToks. The God's Right Hand's a very special one because I actually changed the font to like a typewriter font or a kind of computer font. For the reason why, I cannot say because that would spoil the book. And then I have one more here that's just very kind of nice.
Yeah, so actually that's a very interesting thing that you bring up, Shanti, because I spent probably 2 hours on Saturday researching fonts, and fonts are really important because I don't think people realize how fonts can affect how people feel, and they don't understand it and they can't explain it, but it actually happens. I had that happen on a website that I owned, and I changed the font one time because I thought it was going to be a better default font, and I had all these complaints right in. They're like, the site's crap. It's not working. I had reformatted it, Shanti, and then all I did was change the font. I did not change graphics. I did not change the interface. I did not change anything. And then everybody automatically loved it. They couldn't tell me why, but they all of a sudden loved it. So I'll tell you what, I have Scrivener up here. I was researching, and basically I did a pretty basic search. I'm not as advanced as you. And I said, what's the most popular, easily readable font? And it came up for me that said Libre Carson, Caslon, Caslon. Have you used that font before?
I believe so.
They said it's very easily, really easily readable, and very pleasant on the eyes. And I think that has an effect when someone opens that book and sees it.
Fonts 100% actually really do. They convey emotion, and in a very strange way, they create character voices. I cannot explain it, but 2 different fonts sound different, I feel like, to the reader. I've surveyed a couple different, especially like teen readers and younger readers. It's also like, especially on the emotion, like, you don't want to write a really depressing book in Comic Sans. Like, that would be very strange, and I would be laughing the entire time. But I almost forgot what I was going to say. Hold on.
Well, we were talking about fonts and how the font really matters.
The font, it's like if it's readable, and in a very strange way, if it fits your story. One book I have, actually, I use the same font on the interior as on the cover. However, the cover has since changed, but that was the original cover, and it uses the same, and it just has this very nice kind of feel to it where everything kind of lines up. Now the cover's different. Honestly, the cover is way better, but originally it was oddly nice.
What book's this?
This was You Won't Know Her Name. This is the new cover. This is not the font that's on the inside. I wish I had one of the old copies with me. I do not, but if you or your listeners look up You Won't Know Her Name, it's the black cover that has the flowers on it. Not I Know Her Name, that also has flowers on it, but the one that has like
Why'd
the
you
flower
change
border.
the cover for? Did you change it because you didn't like it, or for sales?
Both. The original cover I had designed myself, and I wasn't really feeling it anymore. I feel like it didn't relate to the story enough. It didn't look professional. It was just something I'd done because You Won't Know Her Name is a very interesting story behind it. But with the new cover, the cover has very specific elements of the story on it, very kind of actually deep meanings to the plot, and it just looks nicer overall. And I actually like the font better on this.
Well, I saw that. I saw the most recent book, and in I was thinking, being a internet tech person, we always are testing A/B testing graphics and copy and things. So why, with Amazon Books, why wouldn't you do the exact same thing, right? I mean, has it made a difference in your sales?
It has. The only reason I can't do that for all my books is because of like money wise, because to pay for 2 different covers would be double, and I like to spend a
Right.
lot on marketing. So in that way, it's like financially, it's not recommended. However, for like advertising, 100%, yes, like that's really important. There are some very little things actually I do to get readers to buy my book easier. That if you want, I can
Are you
discuss.
willing to talk? Are you willing to talk about them?
100%. This is gonna. A lot of people are going to be argue with this, but if I pick up a book, and I know a lot of people that agree with me, if the text size is more readable and a little more spaced out, not insane, then they'll be more willing to read it because no one likes a book with the very, crammed small text. So actually, this is the first book I really did this with. The text, while it's still, not like absurd, it's spaced out and it's a little larger than, say, my original. This is my second draft. This is my second draft of Buy and Block, so that's why it's like spaced out kind of weirdly, but like this.
That's an absolutely huge. That's an absolutely huge book, Santi. I can't even believe you read that. I mean that in the best possible way. It's just it's incredible.
Thank you.
So you're saying the font. We talked about the font style, but you're saying the font spacing. I've been using 1.3 spacing. Do you have a set type setting that you like, or you can't remember?
Around 1.5, I'd say. So Vellum
wow.
doesn't have like options kind of like that. You just kind of adjust it with this
I see.
like bar. When you're writing, actually not when you're formatting, I don't know why this is double spaced. 12-point font double spaced is just really incredible. It's not
When you're writing.
Yeah, it feels like it goes quicker, but it's also very easy to go back and read over. And then when you print your manuscript, it's, if you want to like edit it, it's also very helpful. Also, I believe, I may be wrong, that is the manuscript kind of standard for most literary agents.
That's good advice. What else do you? What other little trick do you have?
I have a ton related to both writing, publishing, marketing,
No,
etc. Buying. For marketing, actually.
We're trying to sell books,
Yeah.
Shanti. We want to make money, buy more covers.
Another actually insane kind of marketing trick of mine is, and I kind of touched upon this earlier, is the little bold kind of text at the bottom that's like, mine is actually, and I will quickly pull this up because this is the best little thing I've ever written. But basically, as it's loading, because my computer is annoying, if you kind of have this very strong, not necessarily hook, but this little description of like the book that goes after the blurb that kind of will draw in readers is very helpful. So the one for Never Dying reads, and it's, hold on, I am very sorry, I have a laggy computer. Oh my gosh, sorry. Okay, anyways.
Well, your computer's under a lot of load because we're recording today and it's doing a lot. So you cut a little break today.
One of my biggest tips actually is this little kind of bold thing that's just gonna further sell your book. Mine, it says, Tuck Everlasting meets Star Wars in this compelling and romantic novel by 14-year-old author Shanti Hershenson. What I did there was I took a bit of a children's book that I read in 4th grade that had just little elements of the book and took something very big that everyone knows about that is also kind of has literally nothing to do with the other one. It was like, okay, so when you read this, you're going to kind of be reminded of this and this. And I feel like in some ways, the crazier the better. But also if you take things that people kind of like, that you could kind of see the readers of your book also reading that book and be like, this meets this, or for fans of this author and this author, it's super helpful. And also it's good for keywords too, because if you look that up and then that might come up. I don't know if that's actually correct. I think it is. I believe it is. And then the readers who read that book your book will come up, and then they might buy it.
Do you think color on the cover matters?
Honestly, a little. Um, there are books where I feel like the coloring is a little off. Also, again, color evokes emotion. So, for example, this book, the colors are kind of colder and they're like blue and purple. And I feel like you can tell this book is going to be a little more emotional and a little more intense. Also, because there's literally a girl falling from the sky in the cover. And then there are some books like The Accidental Insurgent where the color, I don't know why it does, it just makes sense. Like it kind of fits.
No, it does. I saw that book and it says I didn't read I haven't read the whole book, but it really feels like I think it's going to read. Speaking of which, do you do the audio versions of this? I didn't look to see.
I actually haven't yet. However, there are books of mine where I'm planning to do audiobook versions. Mainly, The Nightmare of Zyle Delane is one because it's shorter. However, I will have to read the book pretending to be a 10-year-old boy, and that's going to be very funny. Also, I don't know if I can get through it without laughing. The other book that I was thinking of doing an audiobook for was You Won't Know Her Name, because that's easy. The main character is basically myself. Yeah, this book is kind of a memoir, but I started marketing it as fiction originally, and then I was like, well, actually, it's based on a true story, so then it actually got people to read it more. So I should have just gone with that originally.
Because it's based on or inspired by a true story of a memoir of a 14-year-old young woman writer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and did you disguise the character? Now you've blown it, but you is somebody honking outside?
I don't think so. I think it's a TV, but yeah. My family's watching TV, so yeah.
Did you disguise it on purpose?
Yes, because so what I did was I didn't give the characters any names because I tried. So the story is a very kind of dark and very upsetting story. And what kind of happened was like I didn't want to write this where I'm like changing the characters' names and giving them fictional names because that didn't feel right to me. So instead, no one got a name. There's the girl, the person, the girl's sister, the teacher, the principal, and in that way it almost tells the story better. Also because I don't think that character names are everything. I do love my character names actually. And I wanted to see if I could tell a story with no named characters and characters that are not kind of deeply developed and instead let the story and the reader decide like who they are and what they look like and how they act outside of the story.
How are you marketing? You doing all your own marketing to sell these books?
I am, yeah. I do all the marketing myself, so it's a little stressful because I have to send a ton of emails per day. I talk to a lot of people. I run a lot of like ads, and I'm always trying new things. However, I have kind of figured out like what works. So I had to make the marketing plan, and then things started to get delayed, and then stop. So it's like it's hard to follow a marketing plan as a 14-year-old because everything seems appealing and every new little idea. But when I'm marketing my books initially, I have to first do what I know works. And then once it's in the hands of readers, kind of try out new things, I feel like.
What works?
The biggest thing is TikTok, okay? People laugh at me for that all the time. It's like, TikTok? You mean like the dancing app? Yeah, TikTok. TikTok is super helpful for books. There's a huge community of readers and writers who are looking for new books, and especially like writers who are looking for tips. And a lot of them are teenagers. So using TikTok, I've reached a greater platform of readers who like watching my TikToks about writing tips, but also are interested in my story and how this all came to be. And then of course I have the readers who like dystopian books and like sad books and like this and that, and it's all kind of coming together.
And you just pick up your iPhone and start taping yourself and mix it together and then let it rip?
Yep.
Are you finding that tags work better for you to get more engagement and to expand your followers?
Hashtags are definitely a huge part of it because you are kind of allowing yourself to expand into different genres. I mean, there are people, you can literally follow a hashtag. I should check and make sure that's still a thing. That was in like 2020, you could follow hashtags.
Well, it used to be, it's still a thing on Instagram,
yeah.
So I can't imagine it's not on TikTok, although TikTok seems to be going faster. But I had heard, I'd done some research that the tags on TikTok really can get your audience primed, and then TikTok really helps you find and dial in that audience pretty fast.
100%. I have a list of hashtags that I use on every single video because there are people that watch a lot of videos under those hashtags and they'll start getting recommended my videos, especially because I post a ton under those hashtags. And as my videos start to get more views, they will, go to the top of a hashtag or go very high up, and then the readers will find them easier. And then I've actually, funny enough, I've made friends that way. They'll be scrolling through the hashtag, and then they'll find me, and then they'll follow me. And actually, I have a Discord server online where I help teen writers, and we just have a community. It's a ton of fun. And a lot of people found me through my TikTok, and now we're like really close friends.
Yeah, I grew up online, and not grew up, but I've been on the internet a long time, and I still have people that I know and met that I've never met in person ever.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, and it's almost like we know each other. So it's one of those things, and because of that, they buy your books.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the dirty little secret on books is unless you sell 1 million books, it's very hard to make money because of the margins. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I think it kind of depends on how many books you've written. That's honestly part of the reason why I'm writing so much, is because I know if I keep this up, by the time I'm 18, I can make a lot more. Because with each book, I'm building a platform. With each TikTok I post, I gain a bunch of new followers. And then these become like my lifelong readers. And in that way, I think it's more like you don't need to sell 1 million books. However, say you've published 20 books. You need to sell less per book, and it's easier. That's what I've kind of realized. So every book of mine doesn't need to sell 1,000 books, but every book of mine could sell 100 books, and it would equal like a more. It's kind of strange, but that's kind of my thought process behind it.
Well, I also think more swings at bat, the more likelihood you get a chance at striking gold and getting a runaway winner that could sell hundreds of thousands of books for you. But if you're only banking on one book,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people in sports, I'm watching basketball right now in the finals, but they'll be over by the time this comes out. But, basketball players take a lot of shots in a game, and they only make, if they're making 40% of their shots, or a baseball player who bats 300 is considered really good. 400 is absolutely off the chart. So, yeah, I think it's a good strategy. It just, you're dealing with something that I find, and I think most people would agree, incredibly hard to be writing 60, 70,000 words and pumping these things out. So how many books are you doing a year now? Or is that a goal, or are you just still letting it come to you? I mean, you have 17 books. So
it's 17 in 2 years. I write, I want to say, I don't know, 6 books per year, 6, 7 books per year. It really depends on the year. So like last summer, I wrote like 7 books over the summer. I mean, these are like full length, like 300-page books. It like depends on how much time I have during the year, because there are some like summers I have where I don't have as much time, and I mean this summer I only have a month and a half, so I'm aiming for about 2 books. But I don't know, usually it's around like 6 books per year. I do set goals for this actually just for fun. So I want to have written 20 books by the time I turn 15. Almost done with number 17, so I do believe that this is very possible. However, it takes time and it takes effort, and the books actually have to be good. So it's like I set goals, but I don't force myself to meet them.
Well, I got to tell you, you're an incredible young woman, and I am super impressed. I'm sure your parents are super proud. And I'm really grateful for you coming on the show today and sharing all this. I want to have you back on after you get this next book so that we can talk some more and help you promote it so that you can sell some books. But with that, as a 14-year-old going on 15, what does your day look like?
My day is
like, do you get up at 6 or what?
I get up pretty late, honestly. On school days I get up at like 8. I mean, I start school at 8:45, so it's very risky. But usually, I wake up, I go to school, and when I get home, I try to, do whatever I need to do. I chill out for maybe like 10 minutes. Then I just sit down at my desk and I just start writing, and it just kind of happens. I listen to music while I write. My weekends are a little more different, where I usually wake up around 11 or 12, and then I have breakfast. I do whatever kind of I need to do before then. Maybe it's like I have a class or something, and I get home, I sit down, and I write, and then I chill out.
Do you write with music with words or music with no words?
Both. Honestly, it kind of, again, I like my answer for most questions is like it depends on the book. So I come up with these playlists of usually around 20 songs per book, and that's what I listen to while I write. Unless there's sometimes I listen to something different if I think it'll fit the scene better, and then I just shuffle it. And because usually my books have very strong like vibes to them. Other times it's like I'll be like, none of these songs fit, so I'll go and have to look up a new song to listen to while I write. And sometimes it changes. Sometimes I listen to a song a few times on repeat just to get the words out.
Do you have a goal of how many hours of sleep you get a night?
Sometimes. I don't know how much I get, like 8, 9 hours of sleep. Sometimes 10. Usually I stay up pretty late. I stayed up till like 1 in the morning last night, and then I had to go to school today, which was pretty rough.
Oh my God. And did you I mean I know we're doing this show today. Did you write today?
I'm going to right after.
Wow. I do think I agree with you with the music. Sometimes I turn on music when I'm working or now that I'm writing, and if that music doesn't flow, it really bothers me. Do you find the same thing? Like it's disturbing almost.
I agree. I think the music has to fit with the scene. It has to excite me to write. So like if I'm writing like a really sad scene and it's like a happy song, it does not work. Like if I can't imagine the song playing in the background of the scene, I won't listen to it while I write.
Do you I didn't hear any of this. Do you get outside for a minute to let your brain rest and ride your bike or run around the block or I don't
I
know what
do.
you
I just moved a few months ago, but at my old house, which is like 10 minutes away, I used to walk to the park every day. Sometimes I would write at the park. I did that a lot when I was writing Biome Lock, and I feel it heavily
you
inspired.
typed at the
Yeah, I
park?
brought my computer to the park and started writing. It was very peaceful. There were other times when it was like I had to make a big decision in the story, and I would go on a walk, and it would be all I would think about, and I'd listen to music. It was incredibly helpful. I really wish I could keep that up now. I've been so tired from school that I've kind of just been staying at home, but I plan to do that more over the summer.
I did want to ask you a question because I think I read that you're a falconer.
Yeah.
What what is that?
So falconry is kind of, I'm trying to figure out a way to explain it. The actual definition for falconry is use it like having a bird, so a bird of prey, so a raptor, so like a hawk or a falcon or an eagle, and having them on your glove, but also using them to hunt. I don't hunt. I just go up to a place in Alpine and learn falconry and learn how to like call the hawk to your glove and how to hold the hawk. It's very fun. I've been doing it since I was 7 years old. I don't do it as much anymore because I've been so busy, but it was something I just was very, very into. And I used to beg my parents to get me a pet hawk or a pet falcon. The answer was no. I couldn't have a pet hawk. Also because
I mean, they're giant, aren't they, when they're on your hand?
yeah, usually when I was younger they were huge. Now they're not as large, they're still large. But yeah, I used to always beg my parents for a hawk or a falcon. And considering that we had guinea pigs and we have cats, actually, my cat is actually in here right now. He's just behind the camera, like up there. Like I don't think having a cat and a hawk would be a very good idea.
No. We actually have a toy poodle and we have a ton of hawks and owls here in Half Moon Bay, and we can't let the poodle outside without being outside because the hawks are flying over and they'll pick up the dog. They'll pick up a cat.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be really careful.
One of our cats is very old, and she likes to go on our balcony, and we're always worried because they're not hawks, owls that live in our yard, and we're always worried, that they're going to do something.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
If you were to give, you have to pick just 3. You went over a whole bunch of stuff, and we are easily going to be able to have you back on the show and talk about a whole other group of tips and tricks and ideas that you have about writing and what you're writing about. But if right now, based on your 17 books, you had to boil down 3 high performance tips for listeners on writing a book or thinking about writing a book, what would they be?
Oh, 100%. My biggest tip for writing is to write the same amount every day, and you need to stick to that amount. So if you're doing 1,000 words on the book every single day, not 1,000 one day, 500 another day, and then like 2,000 another day. 1,000 words every single day. It helps build routine, and it helps you kind of just go quicker. Of course, if you're doing more on some days, 100%, that's great. But make sure you're not it's not like drastic in the changes, just like 1,000 words. And maybe on like weekends or days when you have off, 2,000, 3,000, but just around the same amount every day is great. Before, I was writing maybe a sentence one day, 100 words another day, and then I realized like just write 1,000 words. And also keep track of how much you are writing and keep track of your story. This is now like point 2. Keep track of how much you're writing and how long your book is and like how long you want your book to be. It's so much easier if you set a goal and you calculate like how many words a day do I need to write in order to reach this goal. I guess in a way my top 2 tips are, linked. And honestly, my third tip is do what works for you. There are a lot of people where outlining might not work to them. It might stress them out. It might be more difficult. It might be more complicated. And if outlining doesn't work for you, try to jump right into a story as soon as you have your characters and just write. And if outlining does work for you, great. Outline as much as you are comfortable with. Only do what makes you feel kind of content and only do what you think is good for you. Because writing is a process. The writing process is different for everyone. And in that way, you need to kind of develop a process and a goal that works for you.
Those are fabulous 3 HPTs. Where is the best place for listeners to buy your books and find you?
So if you want to buy my books, the easiest way to do that would probably be on Amazon. If you look up my name, Shanti Hershenson, you will find me, and you will find all of my books. If you don't use Amazon, most of my books are up on Barnes & Noble, and actually, if you look in your local bookstore on their website, not in store, I feel like it would be very uncommon to find my books in like an indie bookstore, unless it's one that I've done a signing at or have an agreement with. But if you look on their website, they may very well have it online. I find that is the case for most bookstores, and then you can order it and get it picked up there. Just honestly, you can find my books anywhere you buy them online.
Cool. Well, we're going to put all of the links for listeners in the show notes so that they can get to them easier. We'll probably put a link to your author page on Amazon, and you have a website,
Yeah.
which we'll put a link to it, that you have all of this information on there. This has been a ton of fun. I'm really grateful for you coming on. I am at a loss for words how incredibly impressed I am with your accomplishments so far. So congratulations on that. Keep it up. We'll have you back on the show in a few months. And thanks for taking time out of your writing time this afternoon to be on the edge.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. All right. Hang out, Shanti.
Okay.
Just hang out because it's not uploaded yet. Hey, that was a